Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talking Shit. I'm Constantine, and we got Martin over here.
Hi, Martin. Yeah. What are we talking shit about today?
Two things we'll cover the Wagner Group, the recent sort of news with Wagner Group, and the stuff happening in France, all the protests and all
Do you
the.
know what is the news with Wagner Group? Do you have a theory on what actually happened there? Do we have an outcome or synopsis or something, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know. Well, what was it? They said they're supposed to have taken Rostov, and then they didn't take, or they left it, or they took it and then they lost it, and then they were supposed to be on the road to capture Moscow or something, and then they worked out a deal with Putin, and I don't know what's going on with that. I think haven't they now moved to Belarus? I think now or something.
Yeah. So I'm wondering. I suppose you do call it a coup. I think it was real. There have been some speculation that this is all part of a plot to relocate Wagner into Belarus, that then Wagner Group, the private military company, Wagner PMC, can then attack Ukraine and they can wash their hands of it and say, oh, this is the Wagner Group and not Belarus. Whereas I totally think that would trigger NATO involvement into Belarus. But yeah, well, they took Rostov on whatever it was, Rostov, which is sort of south, the bit south next to Ukraine.
Yeah,
Then they were, as far as I know, they were holding it
yeah.
and marching north, and they had anti-air missiles, which they SR something and others, I think they were, which they shot down. I think it was 6 aircraft. I've heard something like a dozen airmen have died. There was a plane, an AN-22, I think it was, that went down. Excuse me.
Sorry.
And I think the rest were all attack helicopters. KA-52, I think, attack helicopters. So pilots dead. I can't imagine Russia being rich in aircraft or air assets at the moment. I mean, I would have assumed each one of those helicopters and the plane have all been valuable, because I don't think they can rebuild them or rebuy them very quickly. Yeah, they were marching
Well, I
on
do.
Moscow. They
Well, they
were
do. I was going to
200.
say they do produce their own planes over there. They've got the Sukhoi company, which
Yeah,
produces planes. So I don't know how quickly they.
yeah. And as I said, I'm not sure how quickly Russia is producing
Yeah.
anything. I haven't seen much numbers, and it's all, well, it's buried in the bullshit of the ongoing war. Um, but yeah, 200K out of Moscow. Apparently, the head of Wagner, whatever the fuck his
Igor
name is,
Igor Progsin. Hang on, I'll look it up.
Prigo, whatever, I think it Prigo, Priggy, who apparently said the day before or something that there will be a new president in Russia, then decides 200K out of winning the prize. When with the march, it would have been hilarious if it had worked, because Russians would have taken Russia quickly than they took Ukraine, if they'd marched on Moscow and taken it. And then he goes, oh yeah, no, actually we're all good, and I'm going to go to Belarus. And there have been a couple of things I've read about why that happened. One is that he was really just a loyalist who he really loves Putin, and it was really just to get rid of some of the top generals who were causing problems. That now that those top generals are gone, Wagner will be able to win. But the entire Wagner group is basically going to get disbanded. Any Wagner supporters are going to get moved over to Belarus, which is away from the fighting in Ukraine where they need to be. So I can't see that being a good outcome. And if they think that they're going to launch an attack from Belarus into Ukraine after the shit that's been going on for the last 2 years, I mean, they haven't even taken Ukraine with the attack they did launch. I don't see how Belarus is going to be any different. So yeah, there's theory one where he was just yeah, that makes no sense to me, that he's some kind of Putin loyalist, and we just need to get rid of these generals and then we'll win the war. The
Yeah.
second one I did hear, or I don't know what order I actually heard these in, but the other theory I wanted to mention that I did hear, which I thought was interesting, was that his family was actually kidnapped by Putin and threatened or something like that, and that's what called him to sort of pull it off.
Yeah, that's believable. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that happening where but I also see that being like inherently retarded, like you're marching on Moscow and you haven't got your family sorted. I can see them doing that, maybe not being able to get a message through to them, and then being caught surprised when, oh shit, my brother
Yeah,
or
not
cousin.
believe it or not, that not everyone's that well organized. You know,
Yeah.
even people
So
who were like, come.
organizing well. If the Russians were well organized, this would that we wouldn't be having a 2 year, into a second year of war in Ukraine. They would have had their shit together from day one, and they would have been there. So yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you on that. I do. There is some plausibility in that, and I can see it then being okay, sort of like a stalemate where right, we'll go to Belarus. You let my family go, and I won't overthrow Russia. But I can't see that. Like I can't see Putin honoring that kind of deal. Although I suppose he would have to if
No,
he's
I think he
concerned
would.
about
I think he
troops.
would.
Um,
By the way,
also,
just for the record, his name is Yevgeny Viktorovich Prigozhin. So
Prigozhin.
actually, he's got an
Prigozhin.
interesting. I was reading about him a couple of days ago. He's got an interesting background. I think he was actually Putin's chef or something like that
Yes,
before he became
he
a
was the chef.
leader of a.
Putin's gone, yes, you've worked close to me and I haven't died from food poisoning. You're perfect to run a military. Here you go. That's the authoritarian state's way of promotion. You're close to the leader. You get any job you like, regardless of your competence. And I think that's why they're having problems in Ukraine. That Putin's because this is the thing with authoritarian leaders. If don't mind the scritching, that's the dog. Um, but this is the thing with authoritarian leaders. They basically fear. I'm getting ready to curl up, are you? They fear anyone who's got any kind of authority with them, anyone who disagrees with them, so they push them aside. But the people who disagree with them are the smart ones who know what they're doing. So he's kicked out all the generals who would have been competent and capable and kept the Russian army strong. He surrounded himself by idiots and yes men who are, yes, Vladimir, our army is the strongest and the best and so mighty and so wonderful, even when, fucking nothing's working and the tanks are falling apart. And then the end result is the shit show you get in Ukraine. So it's sort of a time old story repeating itself. Yeah. And we end up with, well, how I think I don't know how many coups Russia's had over the years, but many. I think they were saying this is similar to the coup in the 90s, I think, when
Yeah, there's
was it
probably a
Gorbachev?
lot of coups. There's probably a lot of coups or assassination attempts we don't hear
There
about.
has been a whole lot of shit. And I actually was surprised the other day, Putin's only been in charge of Russia for 25 years. And you kind of think that's on one hand a long time, but on the other hand, that's kind of nothing. And he's got like what happens when he's going to die eventually? What happens when he dies? Like who takes over? And that's where I think that's what I'm going to say. The third one being that Prigozhin set himself up for a tilt at the presidency somehow or another, running from exile in Belarus, sort of in the way Napoleon was exiled and came back in. We're going to have some sort of after hearing that was going to happen in America, and there was going to be Trump's crossing the Rubicon event, and now got sort of a situation in Russia where there might be a guy who comes marching in on the head of an army when Putin kicks the bucket. I did actually. I just want to throw in there as a funny one. I did read that this was all a plot just to basically kill the actual real Putin and replace him with a body double who's much more compliant. Although some of the responses to that theory were that Putin's body double's been in charge for years anyway, so the real Putin's long gone or something like that. Putin never leaves his bunker. Yes,
I'm sure he
so
probably has a double, but I don't think that's what's happening. But I mean,
I think I've seen a couple of photos where I go, yeah, it doesn't look like they do side by. There was one the other day I was looking at where they had side by side shots, one of Putin and one of a guy who was also allegedly Putin, but the nose was different and the face wasn't quite right. And yeah, I'd be totally agree that he's got
actually,
body.
I think that Biden has a double because there've been some photos I've seen where they've been comparing different Bidens, and one clearly has a very different earlobe. It's weird. So,
Oh, I
have you
remember
seen
that.
that?
I remember seeing the earlobe thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like one earlobe is like
and
mine, where it kind of like it's got a bit of like meat that's hanging off, but then there's
yeah,
another one that goes like is
straight
directly
down.
the whole earlobe is attached to the
That makes
face.
me conscious of my earlobes now.
Yeah, yours is
My
like mine, but then you've got other. There's this other one where it's like there's nothing hanging. It's just attached. So
yeah.
look, I'm sure all leaders probably have doubles, but it's just like you
Certainly
know
authoritarian leaders. Yeah.
you don't really think to kind of pay attention to if this one is the double or the real one. So
Well, it just boils down to who's really in charge and are they listening to him? If everyone's on board with yes, the double's going out and doing this bit for a photo op, then yes. But if the double starts giving, because I always thought if I was a body double for like Putin, just kill Putin and be like, yes, I'm Vladimir Putin, take
Yeah.
charge, I'm the real one. I
That's
killed this imposter.
that's kind
You
of why
know,
sometimes I wonder whether the double theory is true, because it's like, why wouldn't you? But that, I mean, let's face it, if you're a body double, you're not really someone who's got a lot of influence in government. So you're
it's
just a
just when you
wage
tell
slave
people that you're the
basically. So
real
no one's
Putin,
really
and say,
going to
I've
take
killed the
you.
imposter. If you look perfect, you're exactly the same. I've
Yeah.
killed the imposter. Just make sure no one DNA tests your fingerprints you, and you'll be right. Just as long as the leader's paranoid enough that he hasn't got his DNA everywhere and his fingerprints on file or something,
Yeah.
yeah, you'll be able to then say, oh yes, well actually, I mean, you just need to take authority just for a moment to say, right, kill that person and kill all these people who disagree with me, who think I'm the imposter. Send them off to the gulag. Right? Anybody else? No, you all agree that I'm the leader. All right, lovely. And well,
I think
problems
there've
being,
been I was going to say, I think
sorry.
there've been old movies about body, like old movies from the 30s and 40s, where I think they've been like they've had like doubles, where it's been like, oh, it's a political film from that time, and there's been like a body double. So the idea of body doubles has been around for decades, and they probably, you're right,
Yeah.
they probably do have doubles. I just kind of circling back to the whole Wagner Group thing. Wagner Group's history is interesting. They started in 2014. I think their first sort of operations were in Ukraine and Donbass, but it seems here that from what I've read, they've been everywhere, not everywhere,
I think
but
they're in
like
Africa
Syria,
as well.
Libya, Central African Republic, and like any mercenary group, they're probably just a private army. It's just a private arm of the Russian government. So that
Well, yeah,
Russia
I was reading
uses to
something where
deny
apparently,
accountability or deny responsibility for any kind of
yeah,
interests that they're.
private military companies are banned in Russia. And I'm like, how are they banned in Russia when you've got Wagner? And there was some loophole where Wagner is whatever it was, and that's how they've allowed it.
Well,
But
that's
yeah, it's
right.
very clear in the arm of the Russian. Well, this is the thing. It's that the Russian state is weak. Apparently, the Wagner Group has all the good stuff and all the capable people. Again, probably because all the people in the Russian military have been shot. Those who went, hang on, these tanks aren't working. I'm going to go report that. Well, he gets shot because nobody wants him reporting up the chain of command.
Yeah.
And how dare you say our glorious tanks are not the greatest and the best and capable of all these things? And that's the funny thing too. I was reading about, I think, Russian jets and something or another back in the 50s and 60s, where Russia would come out and make all these claims that they've got, hypersonic missiles or hypersonic jets or whatever, and then they didn't, or they did, but the thing didn't work, reliably. And then the Americans would, of course, panic, and then they'd go to Congress and be, oh, Congressman, we need money to build these jets because the Russians have a jet with lasers and fucking cannons and things on it, and we don't have that. And so they get billions of dollars to build, these anti-laser defenses and whatever else. And then the problem is the Americans actually build the thing that works. The Russians just bullshit and hype. Then, of course, the Russians hear about the Americans when they launch their fantastic new fighter jet, and then the Russians go, oh shit, we need something. So then they start bullshitting even more about how fantastic their next generation is. And the Americans again go back and say, oh, the new one's twice as fast and 3 times as strong. We need to build another jet and more money. And of course, again, the Americans actually do build the jet with those capabilities. And then again, the
Yeah.
Russians have sort of faked it. But I was reading that, I think it was in the context of their tanks. They were saying that the M90, the T90, the T14, so whatever the modern one is, I think it's the T14 Armata.
Oh yeah, the Armada. That's the latest
Some
Russian.
hot shit, latest. This is sci-fi sort of tank
It is
stuff.
pretty good by the looks of it. There's got a bigger gun than the Abrams, and it actually is about, I think, 20 kilometers faster, 20 miles faster than
Apparently,
the
got an
Abrams.
engine from like the 1950s.
Wow, really?
There's a guy on YouTube, Laser Pig, who did a breakdown. Again, take it with a grain of salt. No, I'm not going to fact check this. I haven't got myself hold of a T14 to be able to check it. But he was going through and was talking about the engines and things where America has this very strong innovation, sort of, your private car companies and all that generating, new engines and all that sort of stuff. And Russia, to get something out, took something or another, did something or another to it, and said, yes, this is our new engine. And it's got nowhere near the power and the capability of the. And again, that was leading into this thing where, the Russians, oh, it can do this, it can do that, it's wonderful and amazing. actually it can't, or the demo does, but that was because it was under strict sort of supervised testing conditions where, they made sure that the engine was as powerful as it needed to be, even if they used something else that and said it was the engine that it was. Yeah, and they've
So
only built
it's
like 6 or 7 of them, and they're not actually a huge upgrade over what they had
yeah.
existing already.
Well, if I look on
Because
Wikipedia, go ahead.
yeah, but again, haven't didn't end up with or they were supposed to be rolling out these hundreds of tanks or whatever, and they've only got, I think it was like 7 or 4, well, 7 of them or something like that, half a dozen of the
Yeah.
T14s, um,
Well, so a
because
company, so
they
apparently the
don't
people,
actually work. Sorry, yeah, go on.
I was going to say, so Vagon Zavod or Ural Vagon Zavod are the company that makes the armadas.
Yeah,
That's based out of,
Russian.
so they are made by, what is it, a private company?
Yeah,
It's a
they're
Russian
made in
machine building company located in Nizhny Tagil.
private. As much as you get private in Russia, it would all be Putin going, yes, you have this company and you have that company and you're friends with me, so you can have that company and make money. And if you don't, you fall out of a
Yeah.
window.
And also going back to Wagner Group, they are based in
Wagner.
Moscow. And actually, I looked up their headquarters. You can
Not
actually see the
anymore, they're
building.
not.
Huh?
Not
Well,
anymore, they're
yeah,
not.
but they actually, I saw the building that they're headquartered out of Moscow, so it's kind of interesting. But I think you're right. Like basically, any that isn't any kind of private army that isn't state sanctioned would be illegal. I mean, I don't know. Are they or mercenary armies legal in the United
Well,
States? I don't think a lot of
as far as I know, well, I'd think so. Like
except
if you were,
Blackwater,
I mean, well,
gonna
this is
say
this is the thing. Like you can have a America, you can have a militia, and you can be a private military company or whatever. And I just know I read something where in Russia they are specifically banned. You can't have, because it obviously challenges the authority of the state. But
yeah.
Wagner is like some exception to that because of some weird ass. I don't know what the loophole
Well,
was.
I
They
would say it's probably because Wagner's okay because Wagner's controlled by the government. So technically
Yeah,
speaking,
well, that's it.
but they,
At the end of the
uh,
day, that
but
government
old
control.
pirates, like old fashioned pirates from like the 1700s, 1600s. I mean, they were like some of them were effectively working for the crown, like
Yeah,
when
they'd
during
get
the
a
time of the
letter of marque.
yeah. What was it, Francis Drake, or maybe it wasn't Francis Drake, but there were
Yeah,
privateers who technically worked for the still technically working for the government. They were just, they were, yeah, but they had plausible
can you
deniability
just
because
go
we were private.
sink some of these Spanish ships for us, please? Yeah,
Yeah,
and if you do,
exactly.
we had nothing
Like,
to
oh
do
no,
with it.
we're not
Yeah,
doing it for the crown. We're just criminals. But like,
yeah.
so it's sort of
They
like
make money.
an underhanded way of being able to undermine your enemies without seeming like you're doing it. But I
So
mean,
you can be hold the virtuous high ground.
yeah, exactly. So that's
And
really what I think Wagner.
yes, meanwhile, yeah.
That's why I'm not so sure about the whole coup. Like, I'm sort of like, was it really a coup? Was it just a publicity stunt on the part of the Russians, or
This is where I go. If it was, then okay, we go back to that miscommunication era where they haven't communicated enough. Because again, they did shoot down. Well, I've seen on the internet, so it must be true. They did shoot down I think it was 4 or 5 helicopters and at least one plane which had about 12 people, 10, 12 people on it, servicemen on it, or engineers and aircraft operators, whatever. And that's where I go, like, I can't see them. And they were digging up roads. They had the excavators out. They were digging. I thought the dump trucks were hilarious. I don't know if you saw that. They on the road into Moscow, they put some dump trucks in front of the road, and the Wagner guys just pushed them off because trucks, they've got wheels and they can roll. I don't know what they were trying to achieve there. It's like maybe they forgot to put the parking brake on, and they thought, "Ha, we foiled them now." They actually had an excavator out digging up roads. I can sort of, okay, well, for a bit of um hoo-ha if you do that on one or two roads. I suppose it's not a big deal. I suppose there are a few roads into Moscow, but yeah, no, the shooting down the helicopter, like, I can't see, you're talking about a what, 20, 30, $40 million asset. They've lost 5 of them. They're sort of $250 million, somewhere to $250 million to $500 million worth of military equipment that has been, plus the missiles that we use to shoot them down, plus the undermining Putin's authority. Like right now, it's a case of anyone in Russia who saw that, well, there was Putin's speech, which was, these traitors will be arrested. We're going to shoot them, whatever.
Yeah.
And then the next day, oh yeah, nah, it's all good. They're just going to Belarus. It's fine. We're fine. That can't look good for Russia. Like Putin can't, stand up and act like he's in control. And like if I was, okay, I'm not a Russian, and obviously it's a different culture, so maybe that's not a good comparison, but surely the Russian people are going, hang on a minute, Putin's not really in charge here. It's got to have undermined his authority. And that's where I come back to, but if it was a serious coup, surely you would have just taken Moscow, unless, yes, his favorite son-in-law was kidnapped, and Putin said, "Right, we're going to off him unless you, you know, uh, evacuate to Belarus." What's the word? Extradite, exile you, exile. We
Yeah.
exile you to Belarus.
I was going to say just quickly. I lost my train of thought now. I just wonder. Yeah, that's right. That's what I was going to say. Do you know how involved Wagner was in the conflict in Ukraine? Were they like on the front lines? Were they like just
From
sort of
what I
playing a
understand,
supporting
like
role? Like,
Bakhmut. Have you heard of Bakhmut?
what is it?
Bakhmut.
Bakhmut. I think it's a city, isn't it, in Ukraine?
Yeah, the only reason we know about that as a city in Ukraine is because Wagner were there and they took it.
Okay.
I don't like that's the only bit of like in the last since the initial sort of rush of Russian troops in,
Yeah.
where we had the clown convoy to Kiev, which was almost a highway of death on the way out.
Yeah.
We had oh, we're going to take all these little cities in the east that we're going to capture, and then the Russians just got pushed out of a major, I can't remember the province, but the one up north they got pushed out of very, very quickly, with a Ukrainian counterattack. Then the only city they've kind of captured since then is Bakhmut, and it took them 10 months to do it. Bakhmut was some critical strategic, it's going to open up, if you read the sort of the Russ Vatnik sort of point of view on the internet, this was going to open up these attacks into deeper Ukraine, and I don't think it has. And taking Bakhmut was going to be something. It took them 10 months to take Bakhmut. I mean, if it takes you 10, and it's a city, I can't remember how many people are in it, but it's not like population of Kiev. It's like a couple of 100,000, if that, from what I recall. I should probably fact check that.
Yeah, I'm looking it up now.
Just Google that. Yeah, whatever the population is, it's not big, and to have it take so long to be taken, to me says like Russia is not winning this war. I don't want to say Ukraine is winning. I think Ukraine is not losing. I think Russia is actually losing. I think the fact that, from what I've seen since the counteroffensive has allegedly begun, that Russia has lost more territory than it's taken. And yeah, it's the fact that it took them so long to take Bakhmut makes me
Oh
think.
wow.
And then,
Oh.
sorry, what did you find
I
with
was going to
Bakhmut?
say it's eastern Ukraine, not far from Rostov.
Population?
A little over 71,000.
Yeah, 71,000 people. That's what I thought. It was like really, really like it's taken you 10
Mm.
months to take a city of 71,000 people. How are you going to take a country? How are you going to possibly move your forces in if you're fighting tooth and nail, street to street, to take the strategic city of Bakhmut with its 71,000? Like holy shit!
Well,
That's
I
where
mean,
I
don't
think
forget the population's probably gone down since the war. So, I mean,
this
before
is the
that,
thing. It would have all left, and you would have had troops in
yeah.
there instead, which would make things hard. But again, like you're an army, you're designed like Russia has. There's what's his name? Zine, Peter Zine, Zihan, something like that. There's a again YouTuber that I was watching the other day where he was saying, oh, Russia's population is 3 times that of Ukraine. So really, if one Ukrainian dies and 3 Russians die, that's Ukraine's losing. And I'm sitting there going like, hang on a minute.
Doesn't quite work like
Rush,
that because you got a lot of
three Rush,
mercenaries.
well, but yeah, but if 3 Russians are dying to one Ukrainian, you tell me like which side won that battle if all these guys are dead. And I'm like, I'm going with this guy because he's taking out 3 times as many as him. So if that's like Ukraine is a country, if it's a third the size of Russia, Russia should have romper stomped it
Yeah, but
in
don't
three
forget
days.
one thing to keep in mind is Russia historically has always been a country that when it's gone to war, it's always had heavy casualties, but it hasn't lost. So they're sort of like,
Meat
I
to the
mean,
meat
well, they
grinder.
might lose
Yeah.
this conflict, but I'm saying that like it seems to be like in the Russian DNA to be very aggressive and to take a lot of casualties. You know,
Yeah, and
they're
I
not like the
can't.
British. The British are very different
Yeah,
in their warfare. They're very like low casualties, not very offensive. It's because they're very more conservative in their. But Russians are just sort of like I don't know why. Maybe it's the character of their country, but they're just very much sort of
just throw more Zerglings in.
huh.
Just throw more Zerglings in.
Yeah, they have. So I guess sort of they have a bit of an attitude of just throwing more men at the problem, or just keep piling
Yeah,
on.
and
Sort of,
I
yeah.
can't see that being like in modern warfare where, and it's been interesting to see Ukraine obviously getting the equipment from the West, where they haven't got the latest, like they're using Stinger missiles from the 90s. And I think the artillery pieces and the artillery they're firing, they haven't got the latest and greatest. I think ATACMS are these currently hot shit. Oh, if the Ukrainians had those, they'd beaten a day, sort of whatever. They don't
Oh,
have
dude,
those.
don't knock old weapons. They can still work. They can still do their job.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, but this is the thing. But certainly the stuff like in a modern battle, I just can't see how, like maybe back in the 1900s when, yes, fix your bayonet, lads, we're going over, more men would help. But in the
Yeah.
modern day where you've got a drone operator who's flying, like the Ukrainians were straight onto that. They had DJI bloody Phantom or Maverick drones or whatever up, jury rigged with little grenade dropping things that they could hit from their remote, dropping grenades on Russian soldiers. That's why the Russians are now putting mosquito nets on their tanks. I don't know if you saw that photo. There's a photo of a Russian tank with a mosquito net over the top of it, and people
Yeah.
laughing, going, oh, this thing's not going to stop a missile. And it won't, but it will stop somebody dropping a grenade from a drone, which will hopefully bounce off. Yeah, that they're
It's
doing that.
just to put into context, you got your population of Ukraine as of 2021 was 43,700,000, 43, almost 44 million. Maybe
44
take a
million.
few
Yeah.
million, take a few million, take a few million away because of migrants and maybe people who were part of the Russian part
People
of
that fled.
Ukraine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe 40 million, and then your population of Russia 130 as of 2021, 134, say 144 million. So
So
it's
twice
about
as
three to
much.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something where, you know, a country the size of Russia with allegedly the economy of Russia should have been able to romp it. Well, I guess that's what they thought was going to happen, because you look at that's what they did back in Crimea in, what was it, 2014, when they took Crimea, where they just sent the troops and it was a surprise and the Ukrainians were caught with their pants down, but then suddenly realized, oh, we actually need to have an army, and oh, we actually need to know how to fight. Oh shit, we better get our shit together. And then yeah, come 2022, had their shit together. That then when the Russian convoy came and they knew it was coming, were actually able to mount a defense. The other thing that's surprising about this war, I think, for me, is just the last 20 years we've seen America at war. And you look at the Baghdad war, where every night, you know, it was black footage of the night sky of Baghdad with just missiles exploding
Yeah.
everywhere and missiles going overhead. And like America owned the night and they owned the air. Russia, like from what I understand, both Russia and Ukraine are still able to put air assets up in the air. America would have had a no-fly zone over Russia, Ukraine, both of them, without batting an eyelid. Even if they'd lost 100 aircraft, you've still got, you know, another 10 aircraft carriers full. Um, Absolutely decimating the sky. And that's something where I think the Russians, like their whole army is still, they've been saying a lot about the artillery and the artillery strikes. It's like, it's 2023 and you're still fighting with, like, how do you not have, you know, take control of the skies, then you can bomb anywhere you like, but they haven't got enough missiles, they haven't got enough ammunition for the artillery, they
Yeah.
haven't got all this sort of
Look,
stuff.
I
Even
will say
Ukrainians running.
I do think that the Ukrainians are a tougher opponent than the Iraqis, and also because
Oh, totally.
Russia and Ukraine are sort of somewhat similar economically. Um, you know,
It
sort
would
of.
be like America attacking Canada.
Yeah,
Although,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
although that
Yeah.
that said, I kind of think Canada would get its ass kicked. Like I don't think Canada would stand a chance. You know, I think if
Well, just look
America
at the
attacked,
population. You know, how big is
well,
Canada's
this is the,
military? Like,
and yet the same thing can be said about Russia, Ukraine, and
yeah,
Russia's just struggling. I think that again goes back to authoritarian leaders who build this perception of reality rather than they distance themselves from reality, because reality is we don't have the men, we don't have the training, we don't have the weapons. Fucking Yuri's taking all the money for the weapons upgrade, and he's pocketed half of it and given the rest to his cousin to do the job, and his cousin took the rest and built himself a palace in fucking Monaco or something like that. So, and then reported back that, oh yes, General, we have the greatest weapons. We absolutely, look, here it is, and it's made out of plastic and it costs 5 cents.
Yes. Yes, we have made the
Um,
greatest weapons in history. Don't worry.
yeah,
Everything is
and
fine.
yeah, and I think that's a function of authoritarian governments, that again, Putin can't have people who are competent, because competent people threaten him in terms of leadership. So we get rid of them, we get incompetent people, and once you've got incompetent people, it's just downhill from there. So yeah, I I don't think Russia's going to win. I suppose bringing this back to Wagner now, like they've now lost Wagner. So going back to your original question, like Wagner, as far as I know, were frontline. They had the best equipment and they had the best trained guys. They were like, if you were special forces and you wanted a job, you went for Wagner in the
Yeah,
same
I was
way.
reading about Wagner. Apparently, they were, I think some of the, like a lot of, they were made up of
Spetsnaz.
ex Spetsnaz. I mean, maybe not all of them. I mean, mercenaries. So they're probably getting people from everywhere too. But something to take into consideration is, this is interesting. It says here, and I don't know how great a source, Wikipedia is, Wikipedia, but just as a general kind of idea, I guess, Wikipedia does say, in terms of size, as of December 2022, it was 50,000. Wagner had 50,000, I guess, members, soldiers. I guess as an
I
organization,
think
you'd
that's
probably
about
say
the size of the
50,000.
Australian army. Hang on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's interesting that as of April 2022, there was only 8,000. I guess you'd say. I don't think this is. I don't think this would be a fighting force. I think 8,000 would be, as an organization, because you got to think Wagner is not just an army. It's got an administrative arm. It's probably got people manning the phones. Probably, hey, you want to join Wagner? Yeah, cool. Here you go. But it's interesting that it's gone up from, in a matter of like 9 months, from 8,000 to 50,000 plus.
Yeah.
Actually, it
So
says here. So
Australia's army,
yeah.
permanent force, 50,000 personnel, with reserves of another 40,000.
So
So
I guess
yeah,
my point being, sorry, go ahead.
Wagner PMC is the size of, like, Wagner could have invaded Australia.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why I
And
wonder if the whole thing was maybe just a stunt, or maybe my initial feeling was Wagner was probably bribed by the West.
there there
Yevgeny said, "Yeah,
was
yeah, yes, we will do it if you
allegations
pay
that,
me this amount of money," and then probably Putin bought
yes,
him off, or like you said,
the CIA
blackmailed him.
apparently was reporting to Prigo, whatever his name was, that Putin was planning to arrest him or something. So the CIA, I think, was certainly riling him up in the background. And if I was the CIA, I'd do that too. I'd be like,
Yeah,
hey, yeah, let's start a civil war in Russia. This would be great. So I think that got to him, and maybe that's what happened. That maybe somebody got to him and said, "Hey, actually, this is CIA. You're fucking working for the Americans. If you take over, we're going to call you an American stooge or something, because we've got some dirt on you." And that's the other thing. That's the only thing I see as why this. I do think he started a legitimate coup. I think he was trying to take the country, and then something happened that he just went, "Oh shit, I didn't think about that." Because let's face it, he was a
yeah,
cook. He's maybe not
yeah.
quite military hard hat.
Well, I mean, if
There,
his background is being a Putin's chef, then I mean, how much military experience do you really have?
has he got? Yeah. What's he really learned about the military? And then maybe something happened where he went, oh shit. I didn't think of that. Oh yes, now that you put it that way, okay. Well, I'm just going to go into exile and save my skin. As long as I'm out, I'm right, because he's worth billions of dollars apparently from running Wagner and all that. And I don't know how many of those assets
Well, it
he's got.
says on Wikipedia that he's an oligarch, so
Yeah.
he's got to be
So
have a lot of
he's
money.
got some sort of money or
Yeah,
something somewhere. Won't stop him falling out of a window or eating a
yeah,
uranium
well, that's
cake
right.
at some
Yeah,
point if Putin wants him to, if
yeah,
Putin still has the power to do that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, I think, and we're running out of time too. So
yeah,
just to wrap it up, I think it was a real coup. I think something happened that made him go, oh shit, and pull out and forget his ambition of being president. Or maybe he's thinking he's waiting for Putin to die and then he'll come back in somehow. And I think, thirdly, it undermines Putin. And where we go from here is either there is another coup, or Russia, like if Russia loses more ground, which is going to be interesting because apparently they've mined the fuck out of everywhere because they're firing mines from artillery shells now, both sides. So everything's just a minefield to get through, which is why you haven't seen the front move that much. And again, because you don't have the aircraft to fly over it, you've got to get through these minefields somehow. So it'll be interesting to see what happens technology-wise as to who comes up with something that gets through minefields. Where suddenly a tunnel appears somewhere, and it's like, yes, we've been building this for 12 months. But yeah, I think it undermines Putin, and I think the end result of this is I think Russia's lost and is losing.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's. I think it was more like I said. I think my initial reaction was the right one. He was probably bribed by the West and said, "All right, yeah," because they're mercenary. It's a mercenary group. They're not
Yeah,
really loyal to
money.
anybody.
Yeah,
I mean, especially with U.S. dollars being more valuable than rubles, he was probably like, "Oh fuck yeah, I'll make if they're like offering me $1 million U.S., it's more than $1 million rubles, or 1 million rubles." So he's probably like, "Yeah, sure, I'll take the
pay
bribe."
your bloody Ukraine. Yeah,
Yeah, and he's probably like, "Well, we've got 50,000. If we have between 8 to 10 or 50,000 members or something, or I don't think they're all fighting, but." I mean, I think there's enough. I think he's got probably enough
exactly. I mean,
fighting soldiers there that you have a couple of battalions at least. I think so, or division or two. So he's probably like, yeah, all right, let's do this. I mean, especially since we can do it from inside Russia, where we're already inside. So
so,
and like,
so he sits in Belarus now, exiled with
yeah,
his million payout from the CIA, you reckon? And we see what happens from
well,
here.
yeah, pretty much. I think, or he's probably gotten money from both now. I assume he's either been blackmailed by Putin, or he's been bribed by Putin, or he's been given more money by Putin to do nothing or sit still or whatever. So I think that's fundamentally it. So,
Yeah.
all righty. Unfortunately, we didn't get to the French
Right.
topic of France, but we can cover that next week. So
We can talk that next week if France is still alive. If France is still here, yeah. All right.
go, man. Good talking. We'll be back.
Been good talking shit.
We'll talking shit. We'll be talking shit next week. See you guys.